All right.
Okay, welcome everybody. Today is Tuesday, May 1st, 2018, and we welcome the planning board. And thank you all for coming. And we're gonna have a joint work session. And we're gonna start with a presentation of the comprehensive plan website, which is in draft form. I didn't wanna say draft comprehensive plan.
It's pretty much along, I mean, the site is ready to be used and accessed, we're still tweaking it, but let me just start at the beginning to give you all a good foundation. So the intent was to create a comprehensive plan that lived on the internet. So working with Lyle, we created what you see up on the screen. It is not only an educational website where people can go and read information and kind of read what the plan says, but it's also meant to be a management tool. And I'm gonna turn it over to Lyle in a second, who's gonna walk you through the different areas, but the main intent was to be able to house a lot of information, to have a good educational component, a good resource bank, a library, and to keep track of everything that we're doing in relation to the comprehensive plan. So it will be maintained, it will be updated, it will constantly be live, it is connected to the town's website, it's connected to the county's website, it's connected to Twitter, it's connected to Facebook, so that this is another tool for the public to use as a resource, but also a management tool for anybody who is intimately involved with implementation of the comprehensive plan, to track the actions, the activity on the actions, and any updates on each of the actions. So with that, Lyle, I'm gonna turn it over to you, and we can talk about the cost of the website, the maintenance of the website, and how we envision this moving forward.
Not included?
Separate item altogether.
Okay.
Okay, the website, Sabrina's that started out as a regular website, very quickly changed into a project management system for the comprehensive plan. And I'll show you some of the pieces of that in a second. Basically, it's very simple. We have on the plan, we have a whole bunch of stuff in history. Community vision, how the process worked, with links going everywhere.
And you have already seen all of the text that is on here,
Yeah,
all
this-
the graphics that are on here, it's nothing new, it is really the print format of the plan that was adopted that you have all reviewed at some point in time, and it's just up on the screen. There's some tweaks to make it more colloquial, if you will, and to create, the intention is to create live links with some of the references so that all you have to do is click on the word and it'll bring you to the resource. So we're not there thus far, but that is the intent.
Yeah, and we'll be there next week or so and some of that
Yes.
stuff. So the bulk of the plan, which came out of the planning document, is in this section called Plan Principles. And we have our 5 principles. And we can go through and click on any one, and people can find out, if you look at the plan document, this is literally what's in there. But you can go in and say, okay, here's the goals, related goals to support that principle. And this is where it becomes more interactive. So let's say number 3 here, okay, facilitate a range of housing. It's kind of a bad example, it's only one action. So this is the actual goal, and then here is the action or the project that supports it. And that's the lowest level of detail we go to. And this is the part where Sabrina was saying it would be updated, pretty much, every couple of days with new updates. So description of what the action is, what it is, who's responsible, who else has to help out. In this case, it's just really the development department, and we'll show another one in a second. And the current status is pending, it hasn't been started yet. So if you want to go in and find out what's happening now, you can go up here to active projects. And these are all the projects that have been started, the actions. Again, just like before, how much is, who's responsible, how much has been completed, and people can go through and say, okay, well, sewer service is 75% done. We also have the ability to put notes in under here, so to go down, let's say, here's an interesting one, 26.2. So review and revise existing zoning regulations, and this is, I think, combined town board, the development department heading it. And you notice we have a note here, it's been started, nothing's been done yet, hopefully we can update that tomorrow. But May 1st, town board joint session. So it makes the plan more visible, people can find out what's happening pretty easily. Come back up here and you really wanna look at everything. Here's all 167 actions, and you can go through
And their goals.
and the goals are related to, and the principles that they support. Again, always updated.
Right,
Yeah, as you
and
can see
this, actually, this page is that implementation table layout that was in the printed document. Lyle and I are working right now to make this easier to use.
Yeah,
You
right
know,
now, it's clunky right now.
It's very long, if you were to print it out, it's pages and pages and pages of information. We wanna come up with a way to make it easier to maneuver and get through as a web-based document, so we're working on that.
I said it looks great, just one thing, orchids.
I was thinking the same thing.
I
It
was
was a
thinking the
funny-
same
thing.
It was a funny
Kids at
picture.
play and,
Philonopsis was an odd thing.
it's an odd
This
thing
is all
here, you know,
Phil-
Funny, I was
these are called
thinking
filler
northeastern
photos, they have
United
nothing else to do.
Okay.
I don't know, I like orchids.
No, it's just a
It's a
little,
sign of hope.
it's a sign of hope, but I think then what we should have is a native New York wildflower, or we could have a bunch of other things, it just feels very, or kids playing, you know, that's the hope.
Okay.
Well, we can change all the
Yeah, that's
pictures, and we're not really married to
No, but
it.
it looks nice, I'm not saying that, but it's just the orchid is such a disconnect because it's not native to
We'll
the.
change that.
So I think it's
Funny, I was
terrific.
thinking this.
Would the plan be, for example, I'm sorry,
For what I can see, it looks terrific. Is there a feedback portal in here for the public to come back and make comments, or a review place where they can?
It's done through Twitter, so if you go down to the bottom here.
Twitter, don't make it done through Twitter,
Well, hang on, let me finish.
What do you have to do?
So you go down here
I don't do Twitter.
and,
Yeah, that excludes a whole lot of people.
I
They
followed
don't-
you on Twitter.
I know,
Sabrina.
thank you.
and there's
I
Sabrina.
tweet.
Is this your town of Newcastle Twitter?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is surf.
It's not my personal Twitter, folks.
That's
I had
okay,
to
that you
learn
already
to
have
use
9.
Twitter just to make you aware.
No, I'm not. I may be. I have a Twitter, but I don't use
No,
it.
it's not that, but there's a lot of people who
Like
really
me.
don't, first of all, don't like social media, and second of
Well,
all,
what they can do is on the bottom of the page, there's, for more information about the planned comments, just.
We can make that one-
email, but
let's make
there's
that more
no
prominent.
public sort of discussion page where people can.
No.
Nope.
do you mean like open discussion?
No, we
I
don't,
don't know if
this is
it's- I don't know if
just
it's
one
on that
discussion
or
page
something like
on
that, that
here.
can
I don't
be
think you want that,
made.
but I
Yeah.
don't think that Twitter's, why did you choose Twitter
Yeah.
as the means?
It was just one of the links on the bottom.
Yeah.
It's just, it's an
So,
option.
I don't know that anyone's even gonna find that, like, you'd have
Well,
to
that's-
hover over
yeah.
it to know,
Or
to
you need a
click on
Twitter account
that.
to respond, I mean.
Yeah.
So it is, let's talk about feedback, let's talk about what you're looking for in regards to feedback. Cause I think it might change how, whether we build it into the site or we create a different type of communication device for this, I mean, clearly you're right, Twitter does exclude a host of the population, it's not my favorite way to communicate, it's more of a quick blast.
320 something, whatever the word count is, and
Was that why? People have to limit what they say.
Well, it's not meant to
Number of characters.
This is not, while the site is going to be used as a management tool, there is no screening involved as far as what people can comment on.
It's a management tool for everybody, but it's also a communication tool.
Absolutely.
And many people spend a lot of time going to those meetings and have expectations, and this is, I think, is more accessible and user-friendly than the hard document. I think this is terrific.
Thank you.
So the question is, the feedback doesn't exist yet here other than through, you said it doesn't, but can it?
It absolutely can.
Okay.
Yes, which is why I wanna hear from you as to what type of feedback you think is appropriate for this
Well,
site.
just-
But also I want you to consider,
What kind of,
listen, I want you to consider the maintenance of that discussion element on this site, because it does need to be maintained or supervised or whatnot.
the plan is adopted, so I'm not really sure what kind of, we're not really asking people their opinion on the plan. It may be feedback from like let's say somebody who is reading it doesn't understand doesn't understand a section, or maybe the developer has a question, or somebody who's thinking of moving here has a question. But we're not necessarily asking people for their feedback, cause the plan's adopted.
Right,
You know.
but it's also, yes, I agree, but it's also reporting on the action of the town board in the town, and there could be feedback on that, like, why don't you do this, or why aren't you doing that faster, or there could be.
Yeah, so
Well,
we
somebody
could
may wanna
have
do
a
that, but just not
question,
publicly
comment.
on a tweet that everyone gets to see.
Well, that's
make it
that's really, that's really a
Well,
question.
congratulations,
Do
you guys are
want
doing a great job, you know,
Yeah,
whatever.
so
Do you
just,
want a
you know,
community discussion forum where they get feedback, everybody sees it? You know, we'll have.
I think people will be
Have
hesitant to do that.
to make sure it's.
Yeah.
Set
Right,
guidelines
we
about
do not want
what
to
is
do that.
allowed
Because
and what kind of.
I think if we make,
I don't understand this.
I think we make
And that's why my name is
But there's,
email
but there's
feedback more
definitely
prominent.
like, sites that I find very useful are, they've got, somebody can submit a question, but then it comes down to, you know, you've got a topic and then there's the questions with the sort of associated responses and it's like searchable, so if somebody's on a certain topic, I'm not talking about it, well, I mean, I could take you to a website, but
You know, like customer service sites usually have that, so that if you ask a question.
but then other
Somebody
people
else
have
might
to
have
vet
asked
it,
it.
because if one person asks one question, chances are there's 5 other people with exactly the same
But
question.
maybe we should
Yeah,
make
but
that
that
as
is-
questions.
That becomes a job to monitor it.
Posted for-
Or you're gonna, I mean, the risk is you're gonna have, the, you know, Chappaqua discussion group on this.
No,
Right, but Jim, why don't you,
Right, so, you know, we were thinking more like, have a question, have a comment,
Post it.
and, you know, it would be
Yeah.
email us.
Just make it more
You
prominent.
need the path of least resistance, people want ease.
You wouldn't
Yeah.
necessarily have to manage it as part of with a response system or any of that. It's just a place for somebody to say.
Submit a comment.
Yeah,
Submit a
I
comment.
and we
think-
want an
Yeah.
automatic response to them, thank you
Right.
for your comments.
Just make
Right,
it
right,
prominent
but,
and easy to-
yeah, and then we'll talk about, we should be on the
Right, right.
distribution.
It's actually there.
Lau, couldn't you do these as links so that we don't clutter this up?
Yeah, well,
Links on the
actually, what we
specific
could do
questions?
It is there, but it's
we
sort
could,
of at the bottom
it's,
here.
you know, we got this buried here, we could make it more prominent.
Right.
So just send an email to Sabrina at plan@mynewcastle.org is the planning
Yeah.
email, and then,
Well, I wouldn't send an email to Sabrina at her inbox.
well, it goes to plan@mynewcastle, I think it goes to you and Helen.
Yeah, it goes to
Yeah.
several different,
Yeah.
we can assign that mailbox to
distribution.
appear
Okay,
at.
whatever, however you
Yeah,
want.
that's it.
It's
But
not
that's the
email.
tagline, plan@mynewcastle.org.
Okay,
Is there a
fine.
way also,
good.
looking, I think you mentioned that it's really long, it's tremendously long, so especially if the question, or the means to submit the question is at the bottom, no one's gonna scroll down that far.
Yeah.
Scroll,
that's
scroll,
it.
scroll,
Yeah, that's-
scroll,
that's-
scroll,
yeah.
scroll.
Yeah.
So even, for lack of a better term, hyperlinks at top, where you can click on it and it takes you down to a particular level.
Well, actually, one thing I'll just show you very quickly, because I know you guys are pressed for time,
I mean,
let's see.
Yeah, just ask a question.
But here, you look at this is actually the plan content, so
Yeah.
let's say livable built environment principle. Click on it, you can explode it, go down, maybe on the first one you're interested in what's going on there, so there's all the actions under it.
have a site map.
It's kind of like that, yeah, it's basically an outline into the document. You go down here, and then you won't get hit with that deluge of stuff. And so that's another way, that's one of the things, you know, Sabrina and I need to talk about. And that's all easily doable, so.
On the site.
Well, I think what Jeremy's saying at the very top,
Right.
can we have another little icon, the
Oh.
little, you know,
Honestly,
envelope
I
that
think we
says
have a
ask a
box that
question?
Hang on,
stays up
yeah.
at the top
Yeah,
on
that just
every
says-
page that
yeah,
says
like
have a
next
question or
implementation.
whatever.
Next to the
Can
orchid.
it just say ask a
Yeah,
question?
right here. Yeah, we could do an ask a question, but.
Click the orchid, you have a question.
Next implementation.
Where you have the
Oh,
little
yeah.
search thing, you can put it next to that.
Yeah,
Because that always seems to make its way.
Hey, pick your flower.
I mean, it took you 5 months to make a
Who's
point of
responsible for the content on the
Oh,
site?
I'm thinking
So
about-
right,
Like
not for the maintenance and the updating of the site, but for drafting the content of the site. And so are you going to be writing the updates for each of the action items?
As we are implementing them, yes.
Okay. And signing off on the estimation of the percentage completion?
Correct. And it all starts here, folks.
Yeah.
It all
Yeah.
starts
I
here.
mean, you know, it was funny that you highlighted it, Lyle, because when I was playing around with this earlier today, I noticed in implementation for active projects, you know, the sewer project is 75% complete and, you know.
And that last
It's a
25%
a resident who didn't know that that meant that 75%
Well,
of the studies for the
Yeah.
sewers. I think,
So-
oh goody.
Listen, to that
Yeah,
point.
I know, and I know what that means, but
We
I
might
don't
wanna
know that
change the
everyone.
title.
Yes, and we still need to, so the one part of this that I have not reviewed is this, where you have sewer service,
Should be
that
sewer
should be
service
sewer studies.
Yeah,
Do you
okay.
know what I'm saying?
Even
So
if you
so
make
that-
this font the same size as this, well,
Oops,
you know, so it says it's clear, sewer, whatever that said.
Well, it's
before.
sewer-
Study right next to it.
So Lyle abbreviated the actions and the goals, I need to go through and make sure that it actually reflects what the task really was.
That would be good.
Yeah, so that's the
Little
one
editorial.
element I did not get to before tonight.
This could be a ton of work for you.
It's only 167.
Could be,
Depends on how much money we're
Um,
spending.
But this
Oh,
is done
she's
already.
gotta write the content.
The other thing,
Well, she
just,
can't write the content unless we spend the money, so.
kind of,
This is done already.
Yeah, this is.
No, I'm talking about.
to do the work.
Or did it right.
Oh,
Oh,
the other thing is,
Yeah, that's
Sonny,
a
just
whole
knows
question.
how simple it is. You know, kind of, you know, it's, the other thing is, you know, if you're interested in something right on the homepage, you wanna get right into the details. Let's say livable built environment, click on learn more. And this is another way of navigating into the goals and the supporting actions. So let's say goal number 2 was higher density residential development. And then here's all the supporting actions on the right side, which is a total of 1. Here's goal 10, transportation. So it's a good way for people to pop around, see the details, they wanna go in and look at the detailed action. There's one, actually, we haven't started yet. And you can see one, this is where development's taking the lead and police and DPW have to support them in terms of getting anything resolved. So that's another way of looking at the plan. So what we try to do is give people different views, depending on, you know, who they are and what kind of work they're doing.
I think the search thing is a little small, to be honest with you, I was, this little thing.
Yeah, we make the icon bigger, yeah, that, and actually, that's Google search. And so it goes through, it does a full text search of the site, which is one of the things we should have actually on the Newcastle site too.
And I was looking for it at first, cause
Checked for Hala.
I wanted to make sure it has a search function and
Yeah, so they're,
it took me
you
a while to
know,
find it.
resilient.
yeah, the search is an awesome search tool. It both for the content on the website and then even going out into the web. So it does both.
Yeah. Then the last thing was we, as Sabrina mentioned, we have all the documents, at least all the ones so far. Bring up my favorite one here. Yeah, way back when. So they're all available online. The other thing you should know is that none of these pages took more than 2 seconds to load.
It was fast.
And that's the kind of level that we shoot for. So, even that really long one was
That was too easy.
one
At the
1
current,
second.
Yeah, that was like 370 pages. That-
Yeah.
Town development.
The town development plan was
Uh,
370 pages. I know, cause it took me longer to load them into Dropbox than it did
Oh,
for them to
God.
appear here.
After a lot of kicking and screaming down. So we got work on the titles, we have work on the feedback, we have work on the photos, that's all gonna keep, it's just gonna keep changing. And I think one thing, I think this thing will constantly change and evolve. I'll be surprised a year from now, it will look anything like this, so.
by the way, just before I forget to mention, one of the other problems with our current website is the fact that there's a limit on what you're gonna upload. So for example, this document on
Oh,
our
these are big,
website,
yeah.
on our regular website, this document
Yeah.
lives on Dropbox, because you can't upload it.
Yeah, this is actually on the website, that's one of the reasons it's so fast, like the town development plan, that's a 109 megabyte
Yeah,
file.
there's the Volmer study is up there.
Volmer's
The
massive.
recreation master plan is up there.
Yeah.
You know, and so the intent is as you're reading through the actual goals and principles and the descriptions, when we start talking about a goal regarding the recreation master plan, if you click on it, you're gonna go right to that document. So it's immediate, there's no waiting, there's no hunting around for it.
There's no passwords, there's no.
There's nothing.
Yeah, it doesn't take it to Dropbox, whereas if you don't have Dropbox, it's a problem
You
too.
get- Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
no,
a real
it's
problem,
directly
yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Budget wise, we have a budget of $2,500 to develop and maintain this for a year, so just to give you a sense.
Wow.
So, she's a tough negotiator.
How did you pick the web address, like the .us?
How did I get it?
No, how'd you choose it?
It was the only thing that was available at the time. And we always looked at this as kind of like an ancillary website to the mynewcastle.org, which is, what I got years ago for the town. And it can be anything.
They didn't have like planmynewcastle.org? Make it all.
No, they didn't actually, because I think Delaware got it.
Because it's one of those.
Yeah,
There's a lot of Newcastle.
yeah.
The Newcastles of the world, the letter that goes around.
Yes.
Come join us.
Okay.
It looks great.
Yeah.
It's very elegant.
Yeah, it looks really nice.
Thank you, Val.
Yeah, the back end of this is very easy too. We were talking earlier with the WordPress stuff.
What is it? What's the?
It's built on a product called Craft, which is a commercial content management system. And it's designed, that's it. I mean, if you look at the WordPress, everything's right there. And if I want to look at something, if I want to preview it, just click, and there's my entry, and as I type, it changes over there. So that's nice for, people like Sabrina or Carrie, whoever's doing updates. It just makes it a lot simpler. So,
Alright, can you move that search button all the way to the top?
uh,
It's really hard to find
it needs to be
under the
bigger. It
banner.
needs to be bigger too.
Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah,
it's bigger.
that's the big issue. But yeah,
I find it's like not intuitive where it is, I
Yeah.
feel like it should be in the,
Well, that's a
all
good
the way
point.
to the top
That's
right corner.
to the right of implementation.
Right,
And do
Or
we-
under implementation.
Or under.
or under.
I assume
Yeah.
people know what that symbol means also, do
Yeah.
we need to
Yeah,
spell the
that's-
word search or not?
that's gotten pretty.
Okay.
The other thing is this site is totally responsive. It works really well on mobile devices, which is one of the design criteria. So if you want to go in,
If you wanna go in on your phone, or you wanna go in
so
using an iPad.
that's a simulation of a
very-
phone.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to go in and find out about. There I am.
Yeah. Nice.
If I want to go through all the planned content on my phone, God bless you. But there it is. Want to go into details with the orchid.
Good.
There you go. So that's, and about almost half your users are mobile now, so you got a design for that.
Very nice.
Thank you, Val. This is
Okay.
fabulous.
It's great, yeah, this is really nice.
Any other
Great.
questions? Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll continue the discussion on the regular website. Not now.
Yeah.
Because now that you showed us this, it seems to me.
Wow.
You talk about maintenance, and we're maintaining this site for $2,500 a year or less. And we talked about the price for the town one, the big part of that's the technology. This site is designed to be very streamlined, very simple to use,
Faster, cheaper.
and thus it's cheaper.
Faster, cheaper.
And can scale more. So,
2019.
Why can't the town website sit on this
Well,
craft?
it could, but it's a project. You're not, just on that, you're not gonna see a new website for the town this year, no matter how much resources you put on it. I think, early next year's about the earliest, if you get a really good team on it fast. So, and that's why we gotta keep the tires going, or the wheels going on the truck. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Val.
Good evening.
Okay.
Good night. Alright, so next thing on our agenda is the execution of Goal 26. Sabrina, you wanna give a little?
Are we gonna click on her?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, we can do that, right?
Oh, he left the computer. You
He
can
left
put it
the
on, we can all take out our cell phones.
Well, our
Yeah,
technology.
the meeting began.
Do you know how to pair?
Did you ban?
Sabrina, do you know how to do you want that?
We can go, are you connected? We can put it up if you want.
I can, grab,
If you grab my, or you grab my laptop, yeah. It's under the desk here. So we can start talking if you want, I can just lay the stage. This is a discussion for both boards to come together to talk about implementation of Goal 26. Goal 26 reads, you've all gotten emails on what it says, on what the background information is, but it's to create a sustainable mix of commercial and residential uses within the hamlets. And there's specific actions related to the goal. There's been discussion by the town board, and Rob, you may wanna summarize that as to, where all of you have discussed it and what brings you to this joint discussion tonight. And my understanding, it's really an opportunity for both boards to talk about their opinions about implementing this action. Because my office needs guidance as to, where you wanna focus the energies, which will relate to implementation of certain elements of these actions to reach the goal. And really reach what you guys want to be achieved under this goal.
Well, all I would say is this, in my opinion, this goal talks about zoning and talks about infill opportunities. And I personally think, it might be good just to focus on zoning at first, because I think the infill opportunities is a lot more, controversial and ambitious, and I think we should try to chip away at some of the, I shouldn't say low-hanging fruit, because these are big changes. But, the way I started the conversation off last week, which I think is relevant, is, retail is obviously changing. Chapel Crossing is not online, so we can't blame it on Chapel Crossing. The retail landscape is changing all across the country. Downtowns need to figure out how to adapt, and getting more people living down there, I think, is one way to do it, and I think that was pretty clear from the public outreach, that that's what people want. And in my opinion, that's a good way for us to start, a good place for us to start. And I think, the merchants are, they're counting on us to meet the changing times, and not to, we have to do something. We can't just, like I said last week, shop local, things are great, signs are great, all those flowers are great, and even these wider sidewalks and crosswalks, and that's great too, but at the end of the day, it's not gonna be enough. We need, in my opinion, we need more people living down here, and I think the public outreach was 100% consistent with that. The comp plan is 100% consistent with that, and I think we should start with some of those sort of things that we could do and have, do it in the near future, as opposed to the train station, which is gonna take 20 years, in my opinion.
The reason why I think this is going to be productive is, I certainly speak for myself when I say I know what I know and I know what I don't know. And you have much more experience, you collectively as a board, not in criminal law, but in but in planning, engineering, architecture, whatever it may be. So I can look at something and it may not be feasible, because it just is not gonna work. And this is something that you guys deal with on a much more regular basis, professionally, in terms of your position on the board. So I look at our town and I see, for example, without going to the weeds too much, a relatively barren area that is ripe for building and development in some capacity, going north of the intersection at King Street towards Rite Aid. And I see that.
Beyond Rite Aid.
Whatever it's gonna be there, I don't know if it's gonna, well, it's not Walgreens, I guess, but who knows where it's going to become. There's a public partnership issues. We have public space there too, with a parking lot. So something needs to change, but we can't do this on our own. We need the help, in my opinion, of sort of all hands on deck to figure out what's feasible, what's not feasible. And even if we start with, we use the term low-hanging fruit, I still think we have to have a global idea of, where are we going, what are we doing? So, I'm appreciative of any guidance you collectively can have, other than Greg.
Well,
And I would build on that to a certain extent, in the sense that, we've got that as a community, I don't think anybody disagrees that having housing in the downtown is a positive concept and something that will contribute to foot traffic, but it needs to be more, it's not enough all by itself. And that we're in a situation where we are going to have some money to help potentially revitalize the downtown hamlet. There are studies that can be done. But we as a board have not really had as productive a conversation about sort of the big picture vision of what that potential could be. And while we've danced around the topic at various points in time, I think it's would be helpful to get some guidance from people who are used to coming up with those big ideas and sort of having really kind of a collaborative, more sort of systematic effort in trying to narrow down what can be. So if we're talking about zoning changes, what are we zoning to? If we're talking about, you know, trying to encourage developers to come into certain sections of town, you know, what are they building to? And I think that with some of the gifts that you have on your board and some of sort of pragmatic, sort of infrastructure, kind of real world experience that you can bring to it, I think that you can help us move along with some of those big picture ideas so we can sort of discuss it, and then based on that feedback, you know, we can also then solicit input from the residents. But I think we need to start moving towards a concrete vision, and I think almost without putting you know, obstacles in our own way. It should be sort of like, you know, even if it has to be scaled back ultimately, but I think if we could sort of think bigger and then
I'm glad you used the word obstacle, because one of the first things I was thinking of is, I think a lot of times when people are looking at development opportunities, I know we do this and I know other people do it, they look at the barriers of entry that are in the community, and then you try to solve for those barriers.
right, and I don't think we should do that.
You don't think we should look at the barriers?
No, I'm not saying we shouldn't, but I don't think that we should be designing to the barrier.
Well, no, I think you have to understand the barriers
Correct.
first, because the barriers are what limiting people from coming into town, or making it harder for them to come into town. And if you understand the barriers, and I know that we've identified several of the barriers in a complex, and maybe we've identified all of them, I don't know. But identify the barriers and then start from there. So I know Rob mentioned zoning, that's one. The properties being owned by so many different people in town, that's another barrier. Old infrastructure, but we're working on it, you know, that's another barrier, you know. The retail world right now, that's a tough one. I mean, that's a barrier that everybody is wrestling with right now, so I don't know if we're gonna solve that quickly at this table, but I think if we start like that, which I believe Sabrina has already got a pretty good list started, and then just start looking at those barriers. So you mentioned north of Greeley. If that's the primary focus on the board right now, then I would say look at that area and start kind of making your barrier list there. And I don't know if there's 2 barriers there or 12 barriers there, and then maybe you start, okay, how can we focus on these, and how can we make these less of a barrier, and that helps you with your RFP and down the road for other developers.
I have a different thought, and I don't know if it builds on yours or if it is you're the developer.
We're just throwing thoughts out.
But-
Say it, we'll judge.
We'll judge, okay. So,
Well, actually, as she says it.
one could look at, yeah, your scorecards are out, you know, one could look at the obstacles to say, for zoning, to say if you're bringing in a retail shop or if you're bringing in a restaurant or something like that, but would it be more useful for us to think on a larger plane and say, how do we create a destination of the downtown?
Yes.
What would we wanna see, not just here, but in a perfect world, which, you know, maybe we don't get to, but if we had a perfect palette to work with, what would we like to see in the downtown? Sort of lay it out in a broad stroke format and then say, okay, where could these pieces fit into our downtown, and how do you market these pieces to developers to say, look, why don't you come in and do this in our town, because we've got a population here in our master plan that says 114 people who came said they want this in our downtown. And so instead of looking first at the obstacles, should we look at our perfect world scenario and then see how it fits in and dovetails or rubs up against our obstacles?
Or it may be even sometimes in the perfect world scenario, those barriers don't exist.
So I agree. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but I think that, you know, sometimes in the perfect world scenario, you may actually solve for some of the barriers.
Well, what I think is interesting is that nobody's gonna do this all by themselves.
Correct.
The public sector is not gonna do it without a developer, and the developer is not gonna do it without the town, right? So the thing to do is to identify who does what. You need to know what it is you wanna do, obviously. But talking about barriers, what you need to do, I think, is once you figure that out, figure out who does what and what it takes that the town can do to bring the developer in, to entice the developer, right? And it's not necessarily incentives, part of it could be incentives, part of it could be doing a fantastic streetscape, doing one of our smart streets up there, wherever we go. Doesn't matter, I'm not focused on where now, but what. So wherever you go, you could do, okay, we're gonna do a smart street, and we're gonna do beautiful landscaping, and we're gonna make it terrific. The other thing you might think about doing is just giving the development community the confidence that they can work with Newcastle. I've had conversations, we all have, I think, either in public meetings or privately, with Felix, for example. And he's very candid about what he went through with this town. And I imagine that he's had conversations with his colleagues in his world about, you know, well, what was your experience like in Newcastle? And he'll be telling, you know, what his real world experience was. Turned out fine for him in the end, I think, but it was a very long process.
But I also think that was somewhat of a unique situation because of the emotion and the location and the magnitude and scope.
Yeah, and then
That's
you
all
bought a
part of
property
it.
that
That's
was
all
not
part of it.
supposed to be used
If-
for what it
It's
was
a
for,
zoning
and
change.
Right, if you're,
it's a big zoning change.
if you're talking about going into the hamlet of Chappaqua with some private property owners and existing tenants and potentially displacing them, you think you're not gonna have a big emotional situation to deal with? I think you might.
Certainly will.
Well, sure,
Right.
but this is a
So-
hamlet, so most people are expecting there's gonna be retail and housing in a
I'm
hamlet.
not saying don't do it.
Whereas up there
I'm
was
not
not a
saying don't do it.
hamlet, it was in the middle of
But he
neighborhoods, it was a big
he was like talking about
deal.
Felix's
So that's-
14-year
But you're-
experience.
No, but that's,
correct.
that's why, I think it would be a lot easier downtown, not in terms of necessarily concept and what we want, I'm sure everyone's gonna have an opinion, but I think in terms of theoretically saying there's gonna be retail and housing in some form in the hamlets, I think
Somebody's gonna
everyone's
have
sort
to-
of expecting that is what it is.
Somebody, I've looked at the property north of, on North Greeley. There are 12 separate property owners from the corner out to the post office. And
Half a mile.
there are a lot of relatively small ones.
Half a mile,
If that's where, just for example, that's where the conversation started, if that's where you're going to go, you're going to have a population of vested people who live on the property. Summit Greenfield had control of their property. So it's a different set of issues, but they're gonna be issues you're gonna have to, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm suggesting that going in with eyes wide open is probably a good idea. And I think one would need to look at what the developer will have to go through and figure out what you can do for the developer to make it more like something that they would wanna take on. For example, actually make an investment in, once you come up with some plan, take it far enough so that there is a commitment, right? There's a commitment that this is, do a PDCP, right? And commit to.
Preliminary development concept plan.
We had,
Preliminary development concept plan, it was what was done for Chapel Crossing.
we had Summit Greenfield actually do a physical plan, very detailed, that everybody agreed to, that would serve the basis for the zoning legislation that eventually got put in place. So the town perhaps should take some scheme that you wanna do for wherever in the hamlet, get it that far, and then actually, once you commit to it, pay to do the secret, pay yourself to do the secret. So so that the developer can say, well, wait a minute, they've already done that. The developer will come in and say, well, I want to like change this and change that, so we can do an amendment to the secret. But once the town does the PDCP and does the secret, the town is essentially committed to the plan.
Right.
So it sends a message that it's at least, at a minimum, it's a viable option, whether or not ultimately.
It has the support of the
Whether
town.
or not the developer
wants
gets
to
to
work with
forward
you.
that particular project is a separate issue, but at least they know coming in eyes wide open themselves that this is a viable potential.
And one of those barriers are towns that don't work with it.
That's
I mean,
a
that's a
big barrier.
barrier.
And it saves a
Well,
two-year
so,
secret process.
hang on,
at
to
least.
add to what you're
Sure,
saying,
and
Tom,
not to mention the
so
money.
you think the town should come up with the idea of what we want and do a secret and a PDCP on that, as opposed to kind of soliciting input and vision from other developers
Absolutely.
first?
The
Absolutely.
vision
I
should
think-
be our vision.
I think we have that
You wanna be in
vision.
control of the process.
I think we have that vision, I think that's what, Goal 26 is all about.
Well, we have
got
a
all the input from-
conceptual vision, but
Of
I don't
course.
know that we have a specific vision.
No, we do
Not
not.
yet.
I'm
But-
not a developer, I
No.
certainly
But
don't.
what we take from this is, and I think jointly, that's the goal for us to do, is to take that information that we got from all of our customers, if you will, right, our citizens, and it's spelled out here. One of the things that I'm a little concerned with is that we are only emphasizing commercial and residential. Clearly, even right here in the goal, they talk about leisure, entertainment, they talk about focus, they take about a destination. That is something that we really have to come to grips with, because it seems to me, before you do any of this, we jointly have to come up with what we feel is the vision that best represents that study, what we did, and what we want this town to be all about. I would subscribe, or suggest, that retail alone is not it. I don't think residential alone is that. I don't think the leisure entertainment, it's a multi-step stool, and we have to work on all of these to get this right. I think just trying to introduce retail is not gonna work, obviously we know what's going on in retail. I think frankly, and all the studies show us, if you just introduce residential, it's not sufficient to viable to support the business. So you need people to come into the town, you just can't build places for the people who live in the town, it's gotta be bigger than that. So it seems to me, whatever that theme is or story is, there's gotta be a reason, a story, what Chappaqua about, what the hamlet's about, more than just the train station coming through. Using that though, leveraging that, leveraging the schools, leveraging the retail, leveraging what this community is all about, which is about kids and families, and working out and coming up with what we want this to be. I think to sit there and try to say, I'm not quite sure, maybe someone can help me with this. What does infill mean? Does that mean, I should know, I guess I'm on the planning board, but is it?
I actually had to look it up to
Well,
find out what
is it,
infill
it sounds like it's just filling in a couple of spaces and,
Right.
and
It's
looking
usually
at
a
two-dimensional
blighted area.
spaces.
That doesn't,
And I don't think infill is what we're all about. We have gotta go beyond two dimensions and filling in spaces and coming up with a plan that makes sense for the community.
So if I may, I'm sorry, I want,
You beat me by a tenth.
well, infill is only one word in that goal. There's review and revise existing zoning regulation and requirements or develop alternative zoning to better allow and encourage mixed-use development in the hamlets. This could include revisiting, it gives a choice of all those different criteria that is currently within the zoning to shape it for the vision that you have for this hamlet.
Right.
Well, I guess
Zoning is the tool to get us to where we wanna
Correct,
get
and
to, that's all.
infill is an aspect, I just wanna point out, infill is an aspect of that tool, is
Sure,
one of
right,
the
right.
aspects, and it can
Right.
only happen where you have the ability to
right.
physically infill.
And you may have an ability right now to do one infill, and then if
Correct.
something starts to happen, then maybe you have other people that say, okay, I can see my way of selling, and then you infill more, but it's something that even if we come up with a vision, there has to be something in it that says it's flexible. Building A goes there. No, building A may go there when you have a better plan. So, but I think we've hit on a lot of the words. I mean, we're working on infrastructure, but the infrastructure may be more. If you're gonna do North Greeley, you have to make the road wider with sidewalks and everything else, so you can handle all the problems that exist up there, which are major impediments to making it better than it is. But it can be done. You have to have all of it laid out, and it's has to be flexible. So that you have a zone where you have all these things, and you don't wanna say, this has to be this or that. No, you go that, New Rochelle did another approach. They're on it, they're rebuilding, their intent is to rebuild the center city. And they're spending a lot of money, a lot of it's a developer's money, who took another approach as opposed to our doing it, the planning concept plan and then the secret statement. They hired somebody who did it, they had a big selection process they went through, they hired somebody, and they would get like 10% of the opportunity
Oh, interesting.
to do something, but it's huge, there's a huge amount of money in there. What they're redoing, in my estimation, is $100 to $200 million worth of stuff.
Well, that's not us.
No, that's the problem,
I don't
because
know if it's a problem though.
it's, you need a different, yes,
Different
exactly,
players.
finish the sentence.
Okay.
I'm done. Stop being
It's a nice cue word. You need a different set of developers, you have to find the right people who are flexible and
Yeah, so I agree with most of what you said, but not all.
well,
Because
that's nothing new.
That's why we're such good friends. So, you gotta, I understand the flexibility principle, but you only carry that so far as a process to get to some conclusion. It doesn't mean that everything is written in stone, because when you finally, hopefully, get a developer to work with, because you put out an RFP, and you select the right guy, he's gonna come in, you're gonna talk to him in the process to make sure he's the right guy, and he's gonna tell you other ideas, and you'll find the right guy by that process, then he'll come in, and he'll say, okay, now let's do this, and do this, and you say yes, yes, no, yes. And in that kind of flexibility, I would agree.
That's what I was
But
talking
you don't want, these people, we have to understand by now, they only work to their self-interest. That's all they do. They're businessmen, and that's what they do. They don't necessarily have your objectives in mind. They will use your objectives in order for their own purposes. But to have the developer come in and say, okay, this is what I want to do here, put you on the back end of the conversation. You want to be on the front end of the conversation and find the guy who wants to do what you want to do. And there's a process to get there, you gotta figure it out. And it doesn't mean you do it in the dark, right? You talk to developers in the process, there are lots of people that can be talked to informally. Say, hey, what do you think about this here? What's the market? Not just developers, but the real estate agencies.
Sure.
They can come in and tell you, no, that's not gonna work.
So is this a process that you think that the planning board can help us realize? And, we're talking about North Greeley, but then you guys may even have other ideas, but is this a process that you can help us take from kind of an abstraction, but take all of the elements that are within the comp plan with the aspirations for what people are looking for in downtown
Well, I
and
think
help
it-
us move it forward?
I think it's best served frankly as a joint effort.
That's why we're here, I mean, I
Right.
think it's already a given that we're gonna work together on this, the question is what's the next step?
Because I think we could perhaps work with, I like to use the word constraint rather than obstacle or barrier, but we can work with those, we can lay some of those out, but ultimately, you guys, the town board, you have to be the engine that makes the changes that become the enablers to reach out to zoning change, exactly. So you have to do that, but it seems to me that it has to be done intelligently and with input from us and probably some other boards as well, but I don't think this is a situation where there is necessarily, a single person or a board that has ownership of this. I think it would be really well served if people could work together on this jointly. I think there's more energy in it, I think there's more thinking on it, there's gonna be more input, and I think you're gonna get a better project and a better solution. I look at these things, I constantly say, as board people all the time, and playing more self board guys. I look at all these things as equations, it's math. And the longer the equation is, the more that you capture to come up with the right solution. So if you have a shorter equation, you don't consider certain factors or certain people involved in the equation, you may not have the right solution. So the broader you make it, I think the more input you have and the better solution you tend to come up with. Not to drag it out, for another 20-year study. I mean, the history up there is incredible. We have 25 studies that we've done here. So we can stop that. We have enough studies on traffic and all that kind of stuff. But, it really comes down to, what we heard from the public, what we have in the comp plan, which I think articulates exactly what we need to be doing on a very global basis here in Goal 26, and now say, okay, what does it mean? How do we do this? How do we bring people into the hamlet? What is it that we're going to do? We're not going to replicate Chapacua Crossing because it doesn't make any sense to do that again. That's not going to bring people in here. So what is lacking? What's the feel? Some people have talked. I mean, I'll say it again. Adam's not here to yell at me, But, you know, I still maintain that the intersection that we have here with this coming off the bridge is dysfunctional, disruptive, and sets this town, this hamlet, into two separate spheres. Maybe it was great in 1928 when it was designed, 1938, whenever it was designed, but it's dysfunctional now. And I drive through, I've been driving through for 38 years. It segregates the town, and I think it's, you talk about an obstacle, that's an obstacle, not a constraint. So maybe that's something to look at, because what are the opportunities that spring up when that is looked at again?
But-
Maybe not.
And I can't disagree with you, I've only been driving, you know, every day I go past it and think to
By
myself.
the way, it's working much better now that you have to go slowly.
See that?
So that is very, I think, a very positive. I was, you know, when you're going 3 miles an hour, it's great.
Just, you know what, I'm just cautioning you as a Friday morning, look out. But since we've already spent a tremendous amount of time and energy with a frustrating result on that intersection, and we don't control it, and unfortunately New York State DOT and in their infinite wisdom determined that our best efforts to modify it were not good enough. Is that really where we start again?
No, but I think we're getting ahead of ourselves by talking about that kind of detail right
Absolutely.
now.
Okay.
And
Right, so-
I agree
so
with
can
Bob,
I-
but just.
Absolutely.
So I guess
I would
to
not
a-
start with that at all.
I guess to a certain extent, one of the things that, so you're talking to a businesswoman, lawyer, market research person, okay? And, you know, we may have ideas, you know what I mean, ideas of what we think would be good, but sort of having it sort of, and the idea in our head and the way we actually talk about it also may be a little disconnected. But, you know, getting us on the same page about what that collective vision should be, I think is important, so that, you know, I'm not saying that pen maybe goes to paper, but I think that at some point ultimately it needs to become something that we see, whether it's, you know, beyond just like a block plan, but something that we can actually sort of envision. And I know that there is a way to get there, I just don't know what the right steps are. Like, is there a process that's been proven to kind of get from?
Yes, there is, but it depends, you can't separate the personalities and the institutions that are applying themselves to the process. So sometimes it needs to be shaped, sometimes you need to sort of figure out how to make it work for that particular. But there is a logical process to go through that can be modified as you go. But you need to know what your goal is before you start.
So we start
And I think
defining the
that
goal.
Sabrina said, let's at least find some consensus that we're actually gonna do something. And I think that it's, to me, we've done enough planning.
So does somebody need something?
No, everybody's trying to show Joe that Jay's there.
I know, it's gotta be like, over here.
That's what happens when you're subtle.
No,
You're subtle.
came between us. Is it Three Amigos when they're up top? Like,
Okay, so.
But so how do we
so-
get there though?
Let me see if there comes a point, I think, in my experience, comes a point where you plan, and planning is especially important for the public sector because it's all about shaping the policy, right? What you're gonna do. But you need, sooner or later, you need to sort of go through the wall and get to actually designing something. Bubble diagrams are great for figuring out policy questions, but you need to actually start to put pen to paper, to begin to look at something. What do 40 units look like on North Greeley, right? What does a swimming pool look like on North Greeley?
Right, as long as
What are the
people-
things, what are the things, like if you take Bob at his word and say, you know, we really ought to be looking at the comp plan and look at all the things that we said apply to the hamlet, not just residential, not just retail, but there are smart streets, there's walk to transit, there are all those things that really work together to make that place work. Begin to start to do some kind of a drawing of something. Doesn't matter whether it's right or wrong, it's gonna be wrong the first time you do it. you're gonna throw it away the first time you do it. But to be able to look at something and say, oh, that's what that looks like, that's how that could work. And work together over
But
something like that.
who's doing that? I don't think anyone
Well, not us.
here.
No, we can do it together. My only
I mean, we can
concern-
do it together, but I mean, so you don't want, why do you think it's not a good idea to take our comp plan and say, look, we wanna make a vibrant, we want vibrant hamlets, we want to incorporate residential, we want to incorporate retail, we want to incorporate leisure activities, whatever else may be, and seek input from
No, you would.
a developer to come in and say that not, and with no, you know, not what happened with Summit Greenfield, said, oh yeah, if you bring in a supermarket, we're gonna approve that. We would specifically say, we are not approving anything, we're soliciting ideas. And then if there are things we like, we can look at it, and then we'll look at our zoning before anyone comes in.
So my question is, I understand bringing the develop, you have to bring developers in, and you need to do it relatively soon, right? I'm not saying you shouldn't, but I'm saying that I believe you should take the lead. I'd be concerned that if you go the other way, that you're just good, don't mistake motion for progress. It's better, I think, it would be, actually, I just thought, well, what the heck would this look like? So I went ahead and did it. And I've done a three-dimensional representation of housing, a swimming pool in there, retail, town square, all of that on my computer. I mean, I just did it in a few days. It doesn't take that long to do, and it doesn't take that long to change these things. So what I would do is take a look at the comp plan, which is what I did. Take a look at the comp plan, figure out how all this stuff might fit in there, and then put it on my screen, and I'll look at it and say, well, that's interesting, that works, that doesn't work, let's do another one. You don't, and you get to the point where you understand these things, and then you bring the developer in, and you tell the developer, this is what we like.
Is it something concrete
Yeah,
enough?
but with all due respect, that's just your opinion and your vision.
It's a starting
And somebody else,
point.
it is a starting point, wait, let me finish talking. It is a starting point, but someone else could come in, not in this room, and say, wait, that's nice, but what about these phenomenal ideas that maybe we didn't
That's
think
fair.
of?
That's great.
That's terrific.
They will.
But that's
You
when
hope
we
so.
have
Sometimes
to.
people just need something
But
to
I think
respond
when
to.
you're going, an RFP to me is, this is what we want, how much is it gonna cost to give this to us, as opposed to a request for kind of information where you're saying, you're not necessarily comparing apples, hold on. You're not necessarily comparing apples to apples, you're saying, this is sort of what we want conceptually, what are your ideas?
Right.
Which
Nobody's
is not an RFP where you're saying, this is what,
No.
right, it's
Nobody's saying
not.
RFP.
But I think,
That's what- yeah,
no,
you
Lisa, I don't think you heard me. I said you bring the developers in on the process, but you take the lead. You go ahead and figure out what you want, and then bring the developers in. And what you
Well in
want
advance
is
of
already,
RFP.
you've already legislated it.
You're giving
You
them more
can't walk away
guidance.
from it.
Exactly.
You can walk away from it, or you can delay it, but you've legislated it. It's in the plan.
But
It's
just-
in the comp plan.
and just
Just
be-
draw it up.
And just because you want it, doesn't mean that someone isn't gonna have a better idea.
Right.
And we hope everybody would be flexible enough
Right,
to say, okay, that's a better idea.
Right.
right.
But
I'm gonna
without-
give my time
Good.
to the
I
madam
got
from
nervous.
Newcastle.
So I just wanna throw a wrench in the discussion here.
Thank you.
But I get back when you're
Is
done.
that an obstacle?
There are private property owners who own property individually on Greeley Avenue. They would love to improve their buildings for for economic return where it is stable. Your zoning code today does not allow the type of development in the existing building. It does not
In the
meet the
existing
need
building.
in the existing buildings, let me reiterate that, which do not meet the existing goals of the comprehensive plan.
Right.
It's very hard to put a restaurant in a building downtown. It's very hard
Yep,
to add
right.
floors to buildings downtown. So there are tools in the planning arena where you can model existing zoning and then make changes to your existing zoning to redimension what could potentially be here. And then there's an element of economics on top of that that you would factor in to determine if it is consistent with your vision for downtown. But
So-
Isn't that putting the cart before the horse?
well, I'll get, but here's the thing, what I want you to remember, they are private property owners. We have had no discussions with these private property owners. The only publicly held land that is easy right now in the sense of this,
The parking lot.
yes.
It's not big enough.
Is it
I hear.
Not enough.
couple of thoughts?
Well, Jeremy was.
I yield my time so I get it back. I think what Tom is saying, and Sabrina as well, is of critical import, because I understand your concern, but if we don't have an idea that we wanna run with, even if it's going to change, even if it's shared with the public and they realize it's important to let them know, they meaning the public, that we are not married to this is just an idea, whether you really love it or you really hate it, just a starting point. Because people obviously, you know, when they see something, they live it, they feel it, it becomes a part of them. So some people may be turned on to it, some people may be turned off, but there needs to be a conversation with the private landowners, because we don't have a conversation that is dead in the water. But you know, we're at a turning point also right now, because referencing Walgreens, Rite Aid, well, again, it's a private landowner, this may be the sort of the right time to say, listen, you're about to change potentially, I don't wanna say they're going, I don't know what's happening, you know, on the top of King or down there, but there's a potential at least that we're not gonna have two of these stores. And the landowner said, well, wait a second, now's my opportunity. Does that mean that we can swap land potentially? Does that mean that we can have that pool so that people come downtown? Or at least some sort of place where there's the, not necessarily the functional equivalent of a Chapel, pardon me, of the theater, but of the Wallace, but there's something that would bring people downtown, and we move what we do here on the baseball field further north, so people congregate there for some reason. We have to explore all of these options, but if we don't have a conversation with private landowners, and we don't have, whether it's Tom's idea, my idea, someone else's idea, an idea, I think we're just gonna like, give us your best thing that you profit from.
But I don't think you can have a conversation with those private landowners until you have something that's
Give them something to
something
respond
concrete to
to.
look
But
at.
it may be
Right.
something even as simple as listen, we're considering, you know, even engaging
Rezoning.
them, we're considering rezoning, I don't know, you considering holding this long term, are you looking potentially to move the property, what do you envision in your 20 years, 10 years, 5 years of owning the property, what would you like to see? And then you engage, as you often do, the real estate folks, and not to push it too far out, because it's a controversial issue, we've been on and off about the chap line. And I'm not, and Martin, don't quote me as saying it's happening, but, or not happening, but, you know, you talk about building out that corridor, you're redoing the streets, you're redoing, bringing people there, and talk about extending the connectivity and bringing folks downtown.
Jeremy, I think, I could be wrong, but I think that to do almost everything we're talking about here, especially the residential, you don't need to rezone North Greeley. I think you can do multifamily housing there
But it's
without
more than
rezoning.
multifamily.
But no, I know that, but I think that the zone will let you do all the retail that one would talk about. I imagine you could put, as a special use, you could put a swimming pool in there. I mean, if you wanna do something, you can just some kind of a public
Right,
facility.
just throwing it out, I understand.
So I'm not sure you need to go through zoning as a discussion, I think, because somebody could go in right now and build a 3-story apartment building in there. They haven't done it. And there's no sign that they're going to do it, the existing property owners. So yes, you need to talk to them and you need to engage them, but I would think that one of the reasons these people are holding on to the property in Chappaqua is they're waiting for the bright future.
Right, absolutely.
We're bringing it to them, that's the idea of your plan.
And you're not gonna, and you're,
100%.
and I don't think you're gonna get the bright future one lot at a time. I think it takes a bigger thing that they need to buy into.
Yeah.
Either a developer comes in and says, okay, you guys form an organization, whatever you wanna call it, however you wanna form it, and I'll give you a piece of equity in this thing. And you're gonna take shares in it, and we're gonna get rid of all those lot lines, and we're gonna build a project. Or they just buy them out, however they do it. But it seems to me that this could be an opportunity. I would be surprised if somebody said, no, I don't wanna do it. Seems to me what they would say is, well, maybe, tell me more.
Right.
But the Ravis building's already on the market.
Yeah, so what is
Which
what
one
is
is
the height
Ravis.
restriction in that area?
The one's 800,000 or
I
something?
think it's standard residential, 3.5 stories.
I think it is also.
Yeah.
So
I spoke to John
maybe,
last week once about
and
both.
and if somebody wanted to do, so, sorry, this is a rudimentary zoning map. So
Oh, this
if,
is interesting because it shows what's privately owned.
Mhm.
Oh, that's a good map.
But don't you think looking just at North
never seen that one
Greeley in a vacuum
Well,
is
that's
a
what Tom is saying,
problem?
but Tom is saying exactly the opposite, he's saying, don't do that. It's right, Tom, like you just said, we gotta look at it global.
North Greeley is just, it just
Yeah,
happens to be
I
the
think
subject.
it would be a mistake to just, we're talking here about North
Absolutely.
Greeley, to just look at
Absolutely.
North Greeley, I think we gotta look at
That's
everything.
why we're talking
about laying
Well,
out.
that actually brings up something that I wanted to raise at this meeting, but I don't wanna derail this conversation, so I'll let Jill finish, but I'd like to bring up one other topic that's been on my mind.
Well, let me just, the reason I started off with the low hanging fruit analogy is only because what I personally don't wanna happen is that we get caught up in what we do with this train station, which is a blank canvas and, you know, open to a million more ideas and possibilities, and what we do down there, we hold off on, because the reality is that Rite Aid may be changing hands. For all we know, we could have a CVS move in there, you know what I'm saying? So I think we need to, it could happen. I think we need to, you know,
Seize the moment.
look at the whole thing, but at the same time, we don't wanna get caught up in the controversial piece and then not move ahead with some other pieces. That's my only concern, is that we get caught up in the controversial stuff.
But you could look at it globally and then focus on one area.
I don't think anyone disagreeing with that comment.
I agree with that, because here's another factor here, which is gonna be the first thing that you're gonna hear. Oh my God, the traffic, what are we gonna do with all
Yeah.
those cars? And to think about doing the southern end around here and doing North Greeley at the same time, you want a place that people want to drive to, but they also have to be able to drive through it. And so there would be, yeah, I think you need to look at the whole hamlet, and one of the things you would do is, how much more traffic can we accommodate here? And what do we need to do that? And that will shape your overall development program, just to keep it the hamlet that everybody likes with respect to that.
And parking.
Parking is another one. So there are some larger scale studies that'll help you then understand what your limits are and where they are. And then it's a process of trying to figure out where do you want to go first and where do you want to hold off. Maybe there are certain things about North Greeley nobody knows enough yet about this future sort of retail that, you know, the future destination. Maybe it takes more understanding of that. Maybe you have to hold off on that and do something which may be easier to do. But I would be careful not to do something in one part of town that then shuts you off from doing something important on the other side.
Right.
Right.
I think there's tremendous opportunity, and I think this is extraordinarily exciting in terms of what could happen. This is a very, very well-to-do community that is underserved currently by its hamlet for what it could be and should be. And you know, I think that if we jointly try to come up with a roadmap, we will get the right people coming in here. We will get the money coming in here. We will have what we want, as long as we, you know, are, as I say, as other people have said, in the forefront and not just reactive as we've been in so many times in the past. But, you know, not bullying people, but at the same time, making it easier for them when they do come in. As someone mentioned before, get through the secret process. We've done this before, do a GEIS, right? Generic EIS, we're done. And
What kind of dollars are you talking?
we're pretty cheap on it.
Our rates are
In terms of all the studies that we need to do.
You've never paid for
But I'm
one.
not even sure, I'm
In
not
terms of all
even,
the studies we would need to do
but I
moving
don't even
forward.
know if we even know what studies we need to do at this
No, we
point. I
don't.
mean, I think
Right.
we need to be on the same, I think what we need to do as a group is come together with a vision that.
And on the generic EIS, you can charge those fees back to the developers.
Even if you do it
Once
in
you've done
advance now,
If
we
you
do
do
we
it
do
in
now, we can
advance,
say
when they
we-
come in, you can then charge it back.
Retroactively.
Yes.
Okay, very interesting, yes.
But the thing is that they save the time.
Right.
The aggravation factor.
The
Well, they also
intention,
get,
if they're
you
consistent.
get the commitment from the town.
What do you guys build out?
That's a good way of
That's
looking at it.
Exactly.
That's a good way of
I
looking
mean,
at
that's
it.
the partnership that is so critical between
And for
public
us,
and
it's a good
private.
investment if it brings change, it's good.
Trembling us.
It's just gotta be a little bit different.
I could
I'll-
we
put
don't
more.
even take his word though.
I could think about more.
So help, so what is our next step? Yeah, so help.
Comments are very important.
Is the next time we all hold hands? It's such a fun conversation.
Eat shoots and leaves, yes, I remember.
Big huge leash.
You remember the book, Eat Shoots and Leaves?
Okay.
Okay.
Before green eggs and ham.
Never mind. Okay,
I have a bunch.
if you're a grammar person, then you get it, yeah, otherwise you don't. It's a cute little book. Anyway, what is our next step?
Well, I think we're hearing that the planning board's willing to do some work.
I heard some words not said there.
Why don't,
They should say it for the first time.
I'm willing to take up their offer.
why doesn't Tom bring in his drawings and we use that as a starting point maybe?
Yeah,
If
that's a
you'd
great
like to
idea.
see that, yeah, I'd be happy to.
Well, I think, I think that's exactly right, and maybe what we wanna do is just, we maybe have a work session ourselves in the planning board.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
To take a look at it, that'll be quick, won't
Yeah, that
take
makes
long,
sense.
and then we do that.
Okay, so we'll leave the planning up
so-
to these.
Alright,
I wouldn't worry,
Can there's
Tom,
one
though,
other
that
topic, can I
pool
bring it up, and you
downtown
don't
might be
necessarily
like
have to
dead
address it
water.
tonight, but I just like
Was
to.
that a fun?
So wait, can I just,
It was, I didn't intend it though, but yes.
oh, can I just say,
Just from a traffic perspective, I think from a, I
Well,
just
traffic
think
is
that
an
could
issue.
be,
I agree.
would be crazy.
I just wanna, we gotta go back one thing, are we gonna have a meeting where we're gonna go through Tom's stuff in the conference room? In the,
We can have a
Well,
working
how many
session.
well, the only thing I'm bringing up is, it's public,
Yes.
it's on TV, and the people who live on that street might be watching, go, oh my god, what's going on, and does that cause angst?
I
Well, it
think we
will.
need to
I'm
send
just asking.
communication to the property owners where, in the hamlet, and let them know this discussion is occurring.
I would
I
send
think
it,
it's premature,
owners
I think because
Yeah,
it's
we're
way
just
too
looking at
premature,
real
it's just,
early,
it's an
especially
idea
for
phase.
following right now.
And nothing is concrete.
But the
And
problem
if
is
they're watching on TV
publicizing
and they
it,
see
then-
their house going away for a swimming pool,
So-
you're gonna get a phone call.
First of all, nobody watches it on TV. Let's just get that out there.
Yeah, I think it's important.
Oh, your
I
son.
think it's important. Well, Martin, I'm looking at you. It's not make this something it isn't. We're not saying a pool's coming downtown. That's just something we're discussing as
So if we bring.
nice things and ideas and
this is just
concepts.
audio.
I'm prepared to do what we always do,
They'll be
explain
so
it as a town board.
No, this is video.
I've been
This is
in-
video,
I've been-
this is video, it's just not live.
Yeah.
I said, I've been in a public meeting where that happened
no,
and
I-
people went
Well,
ballistic.
maybe we have to have a very long disclaimer at the beginning.
Oh, I'm just putting out, if,
Running along the bottom.
I kind of think, cause I've been through these things too, I kind of think that they're gonna react the way they're going to react, and there's no way you can necessarily shape or control that. I think you just need to be upfront with what you're doing. And the way I would look at it is not just talk about North Greeley, talk about the whole hamlet.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? And all of these areas, so that, because nobody knows that if North Greeley is even realistic at this point.
Well, we're talking about goal
Right, so don't
26,
focus on it.
Talking about goal 26.
which is really the
Right.
input that we got from the residents.
Right,
I mean,
right.
this wasn't pasted and do this out of, just dragging out of the sky, we have
So let me
tremendous
just,
input.
I think it's important for you to understand, when you talk about the hamlet, this white boundary is the Chappaqua Hamlet. It's a census designated place. This is
Oh.
what is referenced as the hamlet. It's not only the commercial zoning, it is residential zoning as well. So when you say we're talking about the hamlet, you're talking about everything within that white line.
No, we
Send
are.
us copies of that.
We don't have that
Sabrina,
far.
can you send us copies of that?
Well, that's the outer boundary, but that's not.
We don't have to.
we're talking about the
if you-
downtown
We're
of that.
talking about.
Right,
We're not
well,
talking
well,
about
and
that.
again, you know, specifying the area that you are talking about is important.
Well, actually, I wanna bring up, and I don't wanna like, sort of dilute the good energy that's been generated, but I just wanna bring up one other topic that's been on my mind, and it's come up at several times, which is, and maybe it's not a topic for this meeting, but there's something that at some point I'd like to have a conversation with the planning board about, which is this sort of idea of, if we are going to have more residential within walking distance to the downtown and walking distance to the train, I don't think it necessarily has to be walking distance to a train, I think it'd be walking distance to a destination. For,
Could be both.
it could be both, it could be
In this
other
case, it would be
things.
both.
You know, the issue of the new development that's at the top of,
Really?
yes, thank you.
Okay, yeah.
And sort of like how the residential meets retail, that whole kind of thing, like not necessarily now, cause I got the big thing, but at some point I'd love to get the benefit of thinking from the planning board, sort of where you're in cusp areas. or where there could be potentially cusp areas that maybe needs to be a higher level of sensitivity.
So what
The
you're
edge of
talking
the
about
existing
is
zoning
this
district,
top
commercial
area on the
zoning.
top of the hill?
Or all the perimeters where you hit,
Right,
where
no, but the
where
91,
commercial
right.
hits residential.
Right.
Yeah,
And
that's
those
what it is up
transition
top.
areas.
Okay.
That is a separate discussion.
Yeah,
So
but it's been on my mind and I too.
Yeah.
Well, it's on the planning board's mind too, they had a work session already on it.
Right, so before we leave the other discussion though, because I'd like to be able to tie down some next meetings, when do you think you would be workshopping Tom's sketch? Because I'd like to be able to schedule our next joint meeting before our calendars fill up. Because I think it's really important that we stay on task for this.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I think what we could do, I don't think it'll take all that much time, so we could put it at the end of our next meeting.
You don't have time on that meeting for this discussion.
What do we have on that?
Everything.
Or the chop
All that
across the
is
guy's back.
complicated.
Scheduling is very difficult. I think if you wanted to do a different Tuesday, the 22nd, you could do the 29th, you can do June 5th.
Well, I was hoping that we would come back on June 5th in a month and and continue
So then the
this
question would be, is
discussion,
the planning
so-
board available to meet on the 22nd? And
We don't have a
would be in
meeting
this
that day,
room.
do we?
No, I think they're talking about their internal meeting.
Yeah.
We don't have a
They're
meeting
gonna
yet.
Is that Tuesday, the
The
22nd?
29th?
29th.
We're not having a meeting on the 20th, is that the one we're
Yes.
skipping over?
Which one?
Yes.
22nd.
We have,
No, we're not having a meeting.
No, we're talking
we don't have a meeting.
No, I think we're skipping that
I
one.
mean,
It's
it's
We have the 29th
28th is
instead.
the,
Wait,
we're
when
gonna
was
go
that
to the,
decided?
it's the day
We
after.
discussed that last week.
You'll be happy.
Are we not,
I'll be happy, no, I won't, I have plans on the 29th.
I'm gonna compliment
Does the
you.
22nd
We can have
work?
plans on the 22nd.
Does the 22nd work for
I'm
planning board
out of
members?
town.
You're out of town, okay, that doesn't work.
So we're looking at the 29th.
birthday also,
It's the
so
day after
usually that's why you
Memorial
took it
Day.
off.
Is that okay?
I have to wait a couple of days and check it out at home.
No, I know, I wanted to.
Dick, is that okay?
Potentially.
Dick, is that okay, 29th?
We'll talk about it in,
We're looking at the
22nd,
29th right now,
Keep it
Sheila
very
needs to
attention.
confirm.
you missed the meeting yesterday.
29th, the day after the
So-
holiday.
You missed the meeting yesterday.
Just one word of caution if I could about this, because Greg and I have been through this kind of thing before. It's really important, I think, to, when people call, because they will, right? To have a way to respond, which is non-threatening, because this really is a non-threatening process, right? And there are gonna be drawings that they're gonna see on TV that will have a lot of level of specificity to it with respect to their particular piece of property. And I think that rather, the first impulse is going to be for people to misrepresent it in their minds and say, oh, that's the plan. They're going to build that. And it's hard to sort of get them off of that and get to the nuance of what it really is at this point, is just a physical representation of the language in the master plan. It's just taking the language in the master plan and putting it on a drawing. It's not a plan yet, it's just a way to talk about the downtown. Now, people may not respond to it, right? They may say, I don't believe you, or I don't care, or they may not understand that, but that's the best I can offer.
Well, that's, you know,
Well,
to
look,
also, to bring it to a practical point of view too, I'm not sure how many people are gonna watch it on TV, and they may, no, seriously,
Well, so
no, I tell you
out.
what, I tell you what will absolutely 100%
Kids watch it
happen.
on TV.
It's gonna go on Facebook,
Yes.
Yeah.
and then people are gonna start, they're gonna start making a
Yes.
huge controversy over the
Yes.
fact that this is what they're doing, and how can they do this, and are they crazy? And then you say, well, we're just talking about, I'm just trying to listen to ideas,
So-
that nobody's
Do as
going
well.
right by them. Exactly.
So I think in order to get ahead of that, sending out a letter to property owners, or, just in general that says that this is what we're doing, and that, welcome them to please review the tape of, May 1st.
It's solely a discussion.
I just think
Yeah.
that's so,
Do a state.
That's it, but
I don't think we're even there, I mean, I
It's a
think we can just
discussion,
say,
but it's the
don't
context for.
freak out, this is just a completely
not ever happen.
conceptual,
It may not
ever
early
happen.
stage,
I
I just
throwing
think to get
things
people
against the wall
all
to
like
see what sticks
whatever,
type
I mean, I
thing.
think it's good to be open and I think it's good to sort of go, but I think a conversation with the property owners, potentially if they live there.
Just start putting on plans,
I
brainstorm.
think that makes it.
So when they see the plan, they see the word brainstorm.
That's something like that.
Right.
Yeah, something
Yeah.
like
Or
that.
visual, yeah, nothing to see here. Just visual renderings only, draft.
But we might
I
actually,
like that word brainstorming.
Yeah.
no,
If someone with a college education, that means something.
but we
Right.
might actually have positive response saying, wow, they're finally doing something that we talked about 3 or 4 years ago in the
There's such an
comp plan.
emotional component to that, where people are gonna be
Yes.
married to this, what they see and visualize, so we just have to be very
Well, you know
cautious.
something?
It is what it is, we gotta move it forward one way or another.
Yeah, you have to.
You're gonna break some eggs,
Yeah, you can't let it stop you.
right, you're gonna break some eggs.
And you know, ideally, it's like, almost like, you know, the difference between the most delicious recipe in the world and the worst recipe in the world, they can contain like 80% of the same ingredients, but it's the proportions that basically make it delicious. So I actually hope that like this process allows us to
It's good enough. Thank you.
Somebody's
I love that CIA,
chef, yeah, culinary,
Now I know what you're
Now I
doing all day long,
understand.
every day.
you should have a bake sale to help us.
Those drives up north are starting to pay off.
No, but I do think that, I mean, I'm sort of amazed at what can be done, and I do think that this is like a really good way to get the right proportion of ingredients for a better outcome.
And the other thing, just.
She's gonna bake for us next time.
Yep.
Very excited.
Not patient.
It's so her finger.
I like that, yeah, the extra ingredient.
Whatever it is, don't know what it is yet, but it ends up on the wall in a joint meeting, that's the last time that drawing gets shown. Because it changes in the meeting,
Oh, I
because
see.
people are just,
Well,
this-
listen, I think
we're
all of
not
us-
gonna agree
all of us
on
can
this.
take the-
There are gonna be
whatever
people
happens,
around,
happens.
all around here are gonna say, that's dumb, don't do that.
Right.
And we won't do it,
Right.
so
Right.
it's important to say, this is just a process, just a tool, really,
Right.
that's all it is.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Chuck goes up.
In the master plan on the computer or on the website, there's already 4 options that were laid out. You can just say this is just another option. In other words,
Very good.
we might have 5, 6, 7, 8 options, but we're looking at options, that's all.
That's
And we've already looked at 4, we're taking it a little bit further.
Yours is way more detailed now.
Yeah, that's true. It's a good way to do it.
It's good, yeah, another option.
Okay, we'll go with 3. 3 or 4.
Okay. All right,
Alright,
thank you
thank
both
you.
so much, we
Very
really
good, very
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Keep track of these hours and what we say, or.
No, the fun is over.